Welcome everyone to the as of yet untitled indie series as we take a look at Craft Heroes, a sandbox crafting survival game with a whole lot of RNG. And starting up the game, you get a quirky little comic with some comically handwritten story, and I'll just note here, props to the translation team as the writing has consistently improved throughout development. So if you catch any curiosities, shout them out, as the team seems genuinely set to improve this. After leaving the woodcutter in ore, you will randomly generate a character with pixel styles on full display. But when I say random, I mean random. From stats to weapons, everything is new each time. And in claiming your pink-haired wanderer, for pink is the true color of power, our survival begins. And it couldn't be done any simpler. WSAD to move, WSAD to collect resources, WSD to fight, WSD to place structures, WSD to you get the point. The controls are nice and easy, and the mouse is supported to make things even easier. Collect resources and find a good spot to build your first base, avoiding combat till dusk. As come dawn, true game begins. And then our little tutorial takes you through it all, surviving your first night, keeping yourself fed, and developing your main base. For after that, the sandbox takes over. What happens next is entirely up to you, providing a solid framework to go forth and develop your own story. But there are some issues. And one of these issues I've noticed surrounds our options menu, with half of it only being visible once you actually start up the game. Not to mention so much of it simply being turn on or off. It's rather limited, meaning that if you do have any performance issues, you're going to struggle to fix them. However, with the game still being in development, so much is still yet to be introduced that it's a little tricky to know what's going on, with a mixture of certain flavor text not being included yet, not to mention some curious choices when it comes to their translations, which adds into the fact that there isn't full tutorialization going all the way through all the different items and different structures you can build, resulting in a fair amount of the game simply coming down to giving it a go, giving it a try and seeing what happens, which includes interacting with the various parts of the environment. There are still huge areas that I'm not entirely sure how they work, but having defeated a few lords, having defeated a few demons, you do soon begin to figure out what to do and where to go and what time to set off certain events. But the fact that you're doing this via trial and error and therefore may have to redo a fairly large amount of playtime each time could well put you off putting in that time investment to discover things. Though thankfully, if you do get snuffed, at least you can start again on the same map and simply go back to your old base and rebuild everything, rather than having to completely start again from the very beginning each and every time, though while keeping a little token to show your shame to the whole world. But in summary, Craft Heroes, a game that despite its initial simplicity does evolve into a far more complex crafting, survival, pixel art-based RPG featuring a whole host of different mechanics to not only develop your character, but also develop your main base, construct your party, craft your defenses, and prepare to survive the night ahead of you. Now the game is currently in early access with plenty more features to come, all built around its central day-night mechanic, with the daytime being open for you to go forth and collect resources, explore the world around you, and the night being when you'll need to return to your base, solidify those defenses, and prepare to repel the Dark Lord's assault. During the day, you can come across monsters, and you can also come across a fair few bosses. However, it's at night that the strongest foes will emerge, and in pretty darn large quantities. In fact, to the point where the game will occasionally have a few frame issues, just going by the sheer amount of enemies present. Now, since this has base management aspects as well as resource management, you are going to be eventually able to set up automation, developing generators, developing production centers, mining the resources you need without ever having to leave your base, freeing up that time to go out in search of the Dark Lord or gather some more of those rarer resources or engage in a little bit of lighthearted questing. And of course, if you're going to go out and quest, you're going to need a party. Now, since Craft Heroes is in early access, not all of this is currently available. Though, going over onto their Steam page, we can see that they've been hard at work developing new biomes coming soon, such as the desert or tundra, as well as of course the new monsters or items that will come available with them. It's great to see that they're developing the game and progressing things further. However, it does mean I'm unable to show some of the things they're suggesting will be in. We're going to have to wait and see exactly how they play out, but given what's in the game so far, far does seem like it's going to add nicely into the gameplay that's available, in particular looking at those dungeons. The current overworld does provide you enough to explore and enough areas to gather some resources, however it is a little bit samey and you'll find yourself reaching the edges fairly quickly, but with the increase in scope and the introduction of brand new areas to explore, new lands to conquer, not to mention the randomized nature of the majority of aspects of the game, there is a ton of replayability here, and from a game that is initially rather simplistic, you really don't need a huge tutorial to figure out what's going on, though the initial missions definitely help setting up your base. Craft Heroes follows the key idea of easy to learn, difficult to master, with the efficiency puzzles of developing your base, the ability to gather resources, creating the strongest defensive position you can, as well as the RPG element. From the very beginning, you're able to randomly generate a character, one that will use magic, bows, or swords, not to mention dual wielding, to go out into the world and fight off the Dark Lord. Now, just from a simple glance, you're going to notice this is a very simplistic design, once more fitting into that simplistic game style. But all the information is there. We can see from the top that we know how long it'll be until the next day starts, with this day affording us 800 actions, as well as our food supply, the necessity to ensure we eat enough lest we starve to death in this barren landscape. Our current honor, which is essentially just experience, we're going to be spending this to upgrade ourselves. The current gold supply we have, allowing us to barter with other characters. And our score, meaning if you're into that sort of thing, you can go into rankings and see how you pit up against your friends. How long can you survive? How long can you keep going? Just how high a score can you get? But despite the fact that Craft Heroes more or less plays like you would expect from a survival-based sandbox game, and the fact that you literally are just pressing one button, moving into the enemy to attack them, it still has something of a charm. The game has kept me interested, it's kept me coming back, it's kept me playing. I think that really just comes down to how it slowly introduces new production systems. A lot of games nowadays will throw everything at you right from the beginning, and overwhelming you as they do, or it will really drag out how long it takes to develop a settlement. It hasn't taken me long at all to develop the settlement you see right now, which includes multiple retrofitted and upgraded defenses, not to mention the oh so important beacon. I will say that they do think they should give you a beacon for free, as without the beacon, it's very easy to get lost. By walking away from our main base, we can now see a green arrow pops up, and that is just showing us where to go back in order to find the beacon. It also gives you the option to bring up a minimap, though honestly I've not found the minimap that useful yet. Perhaps when later on we get some upgrades or new patches introduce the ability to mark things on it, but as for now it's just a green dot in a square. But Craft Heroes definitely taps into that want, that need to develop, progress, and maintain, taking simple tasks such as crafting food, building up defenses, or even just going out and collecting new materials and keeping it interesting, giving slow progress just enough to have the player want to keep going, while providing each time with those progressions enough of a clear distinction between single firing arrow towers and these double crossbows or going across to the ballista, that when you get them you feel like you've accomplished something. With all that said, there are some issues. For starters, the performance when it hits nighttime and all of those enemies come out is rather strange to me. A game with this level of graphics and animation, I really would expect to play a lot better on my machine. I may not be rocking current RTXs, but a 1080 GTX should be able to pull off pixel artwork without too much of an issue. Not to mention sound. Now, the music in this game is pretty darn good, particularly at night. I really enjoy the track. It's just, and I am going out on a limb here and saying track singular, but I think it is just the same one on loop. But the fact that it will just sort of randomly cut out is another one of those niggling issues that really needs to be fixed. It doesn't ruin the game and prevent you from continuing to play, but it does just show a slight lack of polish, really, and a slight lack of polish here and there does add up pretty quickly to start to become an annoyance. Now, combat in this game is so incredibly simplistic that it's kind of hard to describe it by any other way than just press forward to beat. And I appreciate that as time goes by, and if we go to our character, we can see we have the addition of talents we could use to improve them. We could also start introducing new members, crafting better equipment, or gaining access to better magics. The thing is though, that's all in the future. And for, I'd imagine, most players, a large part of their early game, even maybe their mid game, depending on how they develop things, you're going to be using standard basic attacks. And given how much has been put into the base building and honestly how fun it's been developing these defenses, I just want to see a little more variety in that RPG element, in the questing, in going forth and fighting foes, taking on those spider lords as we saw, particularly as, in order to get our next recruit, we need to defeat 10 of them. Well, that's a fair bit of fighting. Not to mention, you're going to be running around trying to find those things, so it's going to take you a while. And when you're having to repeat the same actions for a long period of time, then Craft Heroes definitely runs the risk of starting to get on the side of tedium for certain players. But, and I have to be honest, the main part of the game for me has still come down to building up your base, developing those defenses, going forth, gathering resources, and getting to the point of automation, having all of it taken care for you so you can focus on researching, upgrading, and developing your base, developing your character, and eventually aim to move on and defeat some dark broody lords somewhere. That'll have to wait till next time, because games like these demand a maze of traps. So if you excuse me, I have some towers to build. Until next time, as always, peace out. Save the chicken. It's our chicken.